What's up everyone, this is Trendkill Toys. Today I'm taking a look at the recently released Marvel Legends Model 1 or Mark 1 Iron Man. So I have a quick question. Why is it called Model 1? I thought they were called Mark 1, like the different Iron Man suits were called marks, not models. I don't know if that was the thing for the movies or if that was for the comics and then they changed it for the movies. I thought it was always Mark. Maybe that's a movie thing though, and model is the more accurate term from the comics. Either way, this is the Model 1 Iron Man suit. And like I said, this is from the early Iron Man comics. This is the original design for Iron Man, and from the early Avengers comics as well. Iron Man is one of my favorite comic heroes, and the Mark 1 armor was always one of my favorite designs. And I just think it looks really cool in the early comics, and then when they brought it to the movie. So I've always been a fan of this design. Let's see how good they did this in figure form. So basically, everything you see here is what the figure came with, and the figure was like $28.99 or $27.99 around there. That's before shipping and taxes, so kind of a high price for regular Marvel Legends. Usually they're around $24.99, which is still pretty high for most of the Marvel Legends. They come with little to no accessories, and there's barely any sculpt or detail on the figures, and it's just the same repainted bodies over and over again. But there's a lot of new things going on with this figure. I think it's pretty much 100% new, and doesn't come with that many accessories. I guess it really doesn't need it because most of it is in the figure. Most of the price is in the actual figure itself. But you get two alternate hands. You get the basic open hand, and then the fist hand. We'll take a closer look at that later. And then it comes with two effects, a blast effect and then a smoke effect. And those only peg into the bottoms of the feet. It doesn't go into the hands, so you can't do any repulsor blasts. It's only for flying effects, and that's what they look like when you put them together. That's what they're designed to do. Anyway, so the figure itself actually looks really good. I really like how they pulled off the design. It looks pretty much exactly like it did in the comics. I think the shade of gray is a little bit different. It was lighter in the comics, but I like the metallic effect on the figure. You can see it comes across on camera very well. It's shiny. It looks like metal, so that's really good. They also put some weathering on it as well. It's not sculpted in, it's just painted on, but I like how they just took that extra step to make the figure look a little bit better. Also, the sculpting is really good too, and they got the rivets and the panel lines on the armor, which is really nicely done. I like how they included that. And on the back as well, there's not any weathering on the back of the figure. They put most of that on the front of the figure. Yeah, so they kind of cheaped out on that part. But there is this sculpted detail on the back, and they also got the antenna on the shoulder. I never knew what that was for. If you guys know what that's for, let me know in the comments. And then the arc reactor, which is really good. And then the belt is a separate piece that just floats there. It also has weathering and sculpted detail on that. And you got the classic hip circles. A lot of the Iron Man costumes have that. I like what they did with the knees. So you can see the boot actually covers part of the knee, but when you move that lower knee joint down, it reveals the actual knee joint, which they sculpted detail on. So that's really cool. It just gives it more of a robotic kind of look. And then the boots are also very nicely done, and it's flat on the bottom. You do have some of the treads of the boot on the outer edges of the boot, and it's flat in the middle, and then you got some holes for the effects. There's actually two holes. I'm not sure why there's two holes. I think there might be some effects that have two pegs, so you can put, two effects in there or something. I don't know. Just kind of weird. Anyway, so let's get into the articulation of the figure. So here's where the figure really surprised me, is in the articulation. With a design like this, you don't really expect it to move that well, but they did pretty good for the sculpt. But they did really well with the design. They were able to, cut it into the right pieces to make it move properly. So we'll start with the head. There's no eyes inside the head, but there is sculpt for the eyes. I would have liked it to just have been flat, black plastic in there. So that's kind of weird how they left the eyes sculpted. But anyways, so the head actually moves pretty well. It moves that far down and up, and then it does come off a little bit easy. But you also got tilt, which is really important for characters with helmets or masks on. That's just another way that they can emote. Single ball joint from the neck into the body, so that gives you a lot of range, and that's really good for a character like this. So I like how that turned out. Then the shoulders, they go up that far, which is really good. You know, both move the same amount, it's the same sculpt. And of course, rotate 360. And then the bicep swivel is good as well. Double elbows, you can get pretty much past 90 degrees, so that's good enough for me. And the joint, the top elbow joint, is a little bit looser than the bottom one. The bottom one takes a little bit more effort to move, but it's not that big of a deal. I think it works pretty well. And there is a little bit of wiggle on that bottom elbow joint, but there's just a lot of extra space in there, and Hasbro's been doing that with a lot of their figures. They just, for some reason, are not cutting the plastic pieces right, or they're not sculpting the molds properly or something. Maybe they're cutting corners and trying to save a little bit more money by doing that. And on the wrists, you got swivel, and this is pretty cool because you get a lot of range going up and down. And sometimes with Iron Man figures, they give us with hands that are posed like this and they have no articulation. You know, they come pre-posed like this and they're sculpted like that, and you can't move it any other way. So I like how they're going back to the traditional way that it's done with, which is they just put the hinge in there. And so that works really well. So with the torso, when the initial images came out for this figure, I was kind of worried with how this was going to work, but they actually did a pretty good job. So there's only one ab joint, and it doesn't move that far forward. Pretty disappointing. I think they could have done a way better job on that. Maybe you can go in there and cut more, but and then going back, it works a little bit better. Tilting, which is not that much, but I think it's enough to get just a little bit more expression and more posability, and to make it look like it looked in the comic. You can get some of those poses like that, so that's really good. And of course it rotates, although this is kind of weird how they did this joint. So it's a staged joint, which means it gives you some resistance before you go to the actual stage. I don't like that because that resistance is not good. That could lead to breakage. It could lead to stressing the joint in there. So I'm never a fan of that kind of joint. And I think it's pretty easy to make a dumbbell joint there. We've seen it with the classified figures. So here's Shipwreck, and it's the same company. You know, different teams are in charge of both of these properties, but it's the same company. And this works a lot better. So you get a little bit more, and you get some back, and it swivels all the way around, and it's not that stage joint. So they can do it, but they just didn't for some reason or another. I don't know why. And the hips go out pretty far. I was watching a review recently. I don't remember what figure it was for, but I was watching a review recently, and they were talking about how the figure couldn't do the full splits. It wasn't this figure or some other figure, but they were saying that the figure couldn't do the full splits. And they were saying, yeah, this figure can't do the splits. Who's going to pose it doing the splits anyway? So you don't need it. And again, the review, they weren't talking about this figure. They were talking about another figure. But it's like, it's not that hard to engineer the hips to do the splits. No one's going to pose them like that. It's kind of stupid to think that someone's going to put them on the shelf like that. We still need the figures to have access to this kind of motion, so we can do poses where you need that, where you need access to that space. So, you know, of course, no one's going to pose them like that. That's not what we want. But what we want is we want access to that area, so we can pose them like that, or something like that. So it's kind of dumb to say this figure doesn't need the splits. Every figure needs access to that range of motion. It's just people who try to defend Hasbro. A good leg movement going forward, and the thigh swivel is good. It's not loose. Double knees are also pretty good. No boot swivel. They could have put a boot swivel right there. I don't know why they didn't. Seems like the perfect place to put a boot swivel. The ankles are good. They're nice and sturdy. They're a little bit staged, but it's not too bad. And they also rotate on the pin. And like I was saying earlier, I don't know why there's two holes on the bottom of the boots. The blast effect fits into both, so I'm not sure which one you're supposed to use or which one's better. But I guess it makes more sense to use this middle one. So that's what it looks like when you have the effects on it. And I mean, it's okay. It would have been nice if the figure came with a flight stand, so you can have him in flying poses. And I just don't know why there was no holes on the palms of these hands, so you can have the blast effect on there. It just doesn't make sense. And No alternate heads or anything either. They could have easily put an alternate face with the mask taken off, and you can see the Tony Stark head in there. That would have been cool if they did that. Speaking of Tony Stark heads, let's do some head swaps. So this is probably the best Tony Stark head for this figure. It's the most accurate to the comics, I think, and it just looks the best. The size is good. It looks like he's wearing the armor, although the helmet is a little bit smaller than his head, but I think it works pretty well. So I like the way that looks. And this Tony Stark head also works. It looks a little bit weird though, because the hair doesn't let the head go down further on the neck joint, so it looks a little bit weird, but I mean it still kind of works, and it doesn't fit the era either. I think this one fits the comic book style better than this one. This is kind of a different, this is a later look for Tony Stark, but I guess it could work if you really wanted to do that. Here it is with another Iron Man helmet, and this is from the classic Iron Man, or the 80th Iron Man, or whatever it was. I don't remember what it was. Some sort of anniversary Iron Man. That looks okay. I guess if you want to repaint it, it would look even better. Here's a Robert Downey Jr. head sculpt on there. It looks kind of small, but I guess it does make some sense. And I got this head sculpt from eBay, from a Chinese seller. Now for some size comparisons, I got the ZD Toys Mark 1 Iron Man from the movie, and it is bigger, and it has a lot more stuff and detail on it. Two different looks for the same design. You know, let me know which one you guys like more in the comments. And then you can also swap the heads with these. And here it is next to the Marvel Legends Classic Captain America. So I feel like that works pretty well. Iron Man is a little bit taller. Maybe he should be a little bit more taller. Here it is next to another Iron Man figure. This is another one of my favorite Iron Man designs right here. And this armor was designed by Steve Ditko, so that's another reason why I like it. And here he is next to Hulk. And this is a custom painted head. I painted this. It's from the Immortal Hulk series. And I do have the classic Hulk, which I just got today. So I'll be doing a review of this one soon. They're both gray. They look pretty well together. And, you know, both from the Avengers. And they actually look really cool together. So this is a really cool figure. I'm actually really surprised with how Marvel Legends did with this design. I'm really happy with the fact that it wasn't a complete disaster like most of their figures have been recently. Actually, they've been putting out some good figures. In general, Hasbro has been getting better slowly over time. You know, they're adding new stuff here and there. The prices are still too high, I think. A lot of these figures are overpriced, but they are getting better. They are improving slowly, but they're still improving. And this figure really shows that. You know, and for sure they're going to release this same exact figure with the gold paint. That's going to be kind of cool. I'm probably not going to get it. I don't like the way this design looked in the gold, even though there was some, you know, iconic comics with that gold design in it. But for me, I think the silver one is really one of the best Iron Man designs. You know, it's the first, one of the best. It goes back to that era of comics, you know, when comics were new and they were interesting. Even though a lot of those comics had way too much writing, way too many words, the dialogue was not good. But the designs, you know, the coloring, the art, that's really one of the best things about those older comics was the designs and the art. And yeah, so I'm happy with how this figure turned out. Happy to have it in my collection with the rest of my Iron Men, or Iron Mans. And yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say about this figure, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know what you think of this review. Let me know if you have this figure and what you think about it. Let me know if you would buy a gold repaint of this figure. I gotta go. I'll see you in the next one.